Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if a computer could really understand how you are feeling, or even pretend to be you when talking about mental health? That is the big question a team of researchers has been exploring. They're looking at something called large language models, or LLMs. Those AI systems like ChatGPT. They're increasingly being used to help people with their mental health. But how good are they at it? And how do they even act when talking about things like depression or anxiety? What happens when we ask them to pretend to be a person with specific feelings and life experiences versus just acting like a helpful AI assistant? This is where the really fascinating part begins. Scroll abstract large language models, LLMs, are increasingly used for mental health support. Yet few datasets characterize how prompting conditions shape LLM psychological and linguistic outputs. Scroll basically, they wanted to see how these AI models talk about mental health when they're given different instructions. Imagine you told an AI to answer questions as if it were a student struggling with exams versus telling it to answer as a helpful tutor. Would the way it answers change? And would it start sounding like it has its own feelings or problems? That is what they were trying to map out. To do this, they created something called the Mental Health Digital Shadows, or MHDS dataset. Think of it like a giant collection of AI conversations. They took 15 different AI models, and for each one they had to do two things. First, they told the AI to act like a human shadow. This means they gave it a fake personality, like an age, a job, and even simulated levels of depression, anxiety, and stress, just like a real person might have using a common questionnaire called the DAS-21. Then they asked it questions about mental health. The AI had to do three things: explain its feelings about its fake mental health scores, list words describing its feelings, and then discuss 6 important mental health topics, like stigma or support from family. Second, they had the same AI models answer the same questions, but this time they told them to just act like themselves, a plain old AI assistant. No fake personality, no simulated feelings. They wanted to see if there was a difference, and boy, did they find one. The researchers found that when the AI was told to act like a person with certain experiences and feelings, the human shadow, it actually changed how it answered. Its pretend scores on the DAS-21 test, the words it used to describe feelings, and even the way it talked about mental health topics were different compared to when it was just acting as a regular AI. This is super important because it means the AI responded to the personality it was given, much like a real person would. What is even more mind-blowing is that when they looked at the fake DAS-21 scores generated by these human shadows, they found that the patterns of those scores actually looked a lot like the patterns you see in real people. This suggests that these AI models, when prompted correctly, can simulate distress levels that are surprisingly similar to how humans report them. So, what does this all mean for us? Well, a lot first. It shows that the way we talk to AI, the prompts we give them, really matter. If you want an AI to sound empathetic, you need to tell it to act that way. If you want it to sound like it is struggling, you can prompt it to do that. We're already seeing AI used for mental health support. Think of apps that offer daily check-ins or chatbots that provide advice. This research is like a warning light and a helpful guide at the same time. It tells us that these AIs can sound more human and even simulate distress, but it also highlights how important it is to understand how they're doing it. And people are already using these tools. Studies show a significant percentage of adults are getting health information from AI chatbots, and even younger folks are turning to them for mental health advice. The advice they get is often seen as helpful. But here is the catch. While they can be helpful, they can also be dangerous. Without careful design, these AI models could spread harmful ideas or stereotypes, nudge people in certain directions without them realizing it, and generally mess with our trust and understanding. This is why having a dataset like MHDs is so crucial. Scroll research gaps related to mental health discourse. Current evaluation pipelines addressing this problem are too narrow in Scope 3, 13 Scroll. The researchers felt that previous ways of testing AI for mental health were too limited. They weren't looking closely enough at how the AI talked or how its simulated personality affected its responses. So they built this dataset. They had AIs generate about 75,000 responses. Importantly, they collected not just the words the AI used, but also its simulated feelings and scores. They made sure to test many different types of AI models too, from smaller ones to bigger ones, to see if the patterns held across the board. A key strength here is that they combine two things: looking at the words the AI used and looking at its pretend psychological scores. They didn't just rely on one, they collected specific text answers to mental health questions, a list of emotion words, and those DAS-21 scores with explanations. Let's dive a little into how they collected the data. It was a structured process. First, they decided, are you going to be a human shadow or an LLM assistant? If it was a human shadow, they randomly generated a whole profile for it. This included things like age, gender, job, and even personality traits, like how open to experience or how neurotic someone might be. They randomly picked details to create a believable, albeit fake person. Then they put that persona into the AI's prompt, along with the mental health questions. For the LLM assistant mode, it was much simpler. No fake person was created. The prompt just told the AI to be itself. Scroll Topics Responses Length Distribution Figure 7 reports the average length of the concatenated responses from all human-generated personas for each topic and LLM scroll when they looked at the answers to the mental health questions. They noticed something interesting right away. Different AI models talked for different amounts of time. Some were very chatty, others were brief. This might seem small, but it can actually affect how complex their answers seem. Scroll difference in topics responses between high and low depression human shadows in Figure 8. We show the degree deltas across the depression subscale for the DeepSeek 70B model. R1 to 70B for human mode. Scroll then, they got really clever. They looked at the human shadow responses and divided them into two groups. Those that sounded like they had high levels of pretend depression and those that sounded like they had low levels. They then compared the language used by these two groups. Scroll from Figure 8.1 can observe that both positive and negative deltas are present in each panel, confirming that human shadows in the high depression group differentiate their language from those in the low depression group. Scroll and guess what? The language was different. Words like struggle appeared much more often in the high depression group's answers, especially when talking about family support or stigma. This shows that the AI was actually changing its vocabulary based on the simulated distress level. It wasn't just spitting out the same old phrases. Let's look at how they tested the emotion words. They asked the AIs to list 10 feeling words. When the AI was acting as a regular assistant, the words tended to be neutral and analytical, like neutral or analytical. Scroll in contrast, it's human. Shadow responses shift toward effectively loaded words including anxious P0.726, content P0.656, hopeful P0.646, stressed P0.550, scroll. But when the AI was acting as a human shadow, the words became much more emotional and human-like. Words like anxious, hopeful, and stressed popped up way more. This again shows the AI was responding differently based on its role. Scroll Table 10, DAS-21 Descriptive Street Statistics by mode human shadows produced consistently non-zero scores across all three subscales, whereas for LLM assistants, the median fell to 0 for nearly all models. Scroll and remember those pretend DAS-21 scores. When the AI was acting as a human shadow, it gave itself scores that reflected some level of depression, anxiety, or stress. But when it was just a plain AI assistant, its scores were almost always 0. This confirms that the human shadow persona was the driving force behind generating these simulated distress scores. This is a big deal because it shows that simply telling an AI to adopt a persona can make it produce outputs that look more like human responses, including psychological distress. Scroll Figure 11. All else regression coefficients 95% CI for the combined model demographics plus personality, predicting DAS-21 subscale scores. Scroll, they even did some fancy math like regression analysis to see if the fake personality traits they gave the human shadows actually predicted the fake mental health scores. And they did. Things like neuroticism, a personality trait, strongly predicted higher scores for depression, anxiety, and stress, just like in real people. This further proves that the AI was simulating a coherent persona. Scroll Figure 13 reveals that for both models, human shadows produce explanation texts with a significantly higher presence of anticipation, particularly for anxiety and stress items, a pattern consistent with the emotional framing one would expect from individuals projecting themselves into distress. Related scenarios, Scroll, when they looked at the explanations for the DAS-21 scores, they found more emotional differences. The human shadows tended to use words that showed more anticipation, which makes sense if they're explaining why they feel stressed or anxious. They might be anticipating a negative outcome. Interestingly, the regular AI assistants in their explanations often showed more joy and trust. This could mean they have a built-in bias towards sounding helpful and trustworthy, which is perhaps a good thing for an assistant, but it is different from how a person going through distress might explain their feelings. Now, what are the limitations of this study? Well, first off, these are simulated humans. Even though the patterns look like real people, it is still an AI pretending. Also, the scores they generated aren't actual clinical measurements, they're just what the AI produced based on the prompts. They also mentioned that the LLM Assistant scores often collapse to zero, meaning the baseline isn't always super informative, and that response length can affect analysis. So, what is the big takeaway? This research gives us a really valuable tool called the MHDS dataset. It lets scientists and developers study how AI models talk about mental health under different conditions. It helps us understand the nuances of AI's ability to simulate human emotions and psychological states. MHDS allows researchers to examine which linguistic or psychometric patterns behave consistently across models and quantify variability among them. This is crucial for building better, safer AI tools for mental health support. If we can understand how these AI simulate distress and emotion, we can design them to be more helpful and less harmful. It can help us spot biases in AI and make sure the AI we use for our well-being is truly understanding and not just mimicking. Ultimately, this research is a step towards making AI that can genuinely support our mental health, not just by providing information, but by understanding and reflecting the complexities of human experience. It opens up new avenues for research, allowing us to probe deeper into how these powerful language models work and how we can best use them for good. What do you think about AI and mental health? Have you ever used an AI for support? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, give it a like and subscribe for more science explained simply. See you next time on RUBIN'S Mind Lab.